In this episode of Railway, we board the train in Australia. Traveling through this immense continent, we become acquainted with various forms of transportation. We just as easily change from steam trains and horse trolleys to the swift Indian Pacific that will take us to the gold diggers' town, Kalgoorlie. Also we'll go to sunny Perth, where business people, surfers, and parrots are characteristic for the city. This journey begins near Adelaide to end in Perth after 2,000 kilometers. It seems as if he cannot wait to leave. The locomotive 520 has been doing his job for 55 years. It's the Steam Ranger. Built in 1943 to be used for freight traffic, the Steam Ranger nowadays only transports tourists across the Australian countryside. With a huge puff of steam, the enormous locomotive indicates it's ready for its daily ride. Like a horse brought out of the stables, he's led outside. After the Steam Ranger has been brought to the carriages, the journey can begin. We leave the town of Goolwa, east of Adelaide, and head for the seaside town of Victor Harbor. This route used to be traveled by a horse trolley called the cockle train, a term still used for this railway. The cockle train has old carriages which have been beautifully restored by a group of enthusiastic volunteers who maintain this railway. After 20 minutes, we pass the Currency Creek Bridge. It was built in 1860, and yet after all this time, it's still able to carry the heavy load. Except the fancy first-class cars, the cockle train also has two carriages in which most passengers have to stand. However, on a short ride to Victor Harbor, that's not a problem. Besides, the view is spectacular, especially when we pass the ocean. The Steam Ranger from 1943 is still able to pull 220 tons through a hilly area. The locomotive used to run only on coal, but nowadays a mixture of coal and oil is used. After nearly an hour, the cockle train arrives at the seaside place, Victor Harbor. From the old train, we switch to an even older means of transportation, the horse trolley. The trolley brings us to Granite Island, in front of the coast of Victor Harbor. Granite Island is a bare rock connected to the city by a bridge which is 630 meters long. Victor Harbor was named after the first British ship that patrolled this area around 1800. The harbor, with Granite Island just in front of its entrance, later offered protection to many more British ships. The horse trolley has been in use since 1895. Its 1 horsepower is a Clydesdale. These tough horses are used to hard labor and seem to have no difficulty making the trip to Granite Island 3 or 4 times a day. When more tourists want to make the trip, of course, fresh horses are used. From Granite Island and Victor Harbor, we go further into the country. In the town Mannum, we visit the Murray River, with its 2,000 kilometers, Australia's longest river. The Murray Princess lies hiding under the trees. It's a paddle steamer, and no small one either. The boat has no less than 4 decks and looks really impressive. We come along for a short while.
Steady up again for a minute. Back on course.
The Murray Princess is fully equipped to transport tourists. On board there are, among other things, a restaurant and various luxurious sleeping cabins. Ships such as these used to sail on the Murray River in large numbers. Their cargo mainly consisted of wool and corn. This was transported to the harbors downstream, and from there throughout the entire country. The paddle steamers lost the function of freight traffic at the beginning of the century to their main competitor, the train. We're on board the Indian Pacific and heading from Adelaide towards Kalgoorlie. It's a long journey, about 1,500 kilometers. On board, however, one lacks for nothing. While the vast landscape passes their eye, the passengers enjoy their extensive meals. The chefs on this rocking train are not inferior to their colleagues in fancy restaurants. Not everyone chooses the luxury of the dining cars. Many passengers travel sitting class. It's cheaper and an excellent way to leisurely admire the fascinating landscape. It's already dark when the Indian Pacific stops in Kalgoorlie. Some passengers stay in their luxurious sleeping cars. Most of them, however, get out to look more closely at the old mine workers' town of Kalgoorlie. When the Irishman Paddy Hannon first found gold there in 1893, there was not a single house in this place. Less than 10 years after that, more than 30,000 people lived in Kalgoorlie. Gold diggers from all over the world came to try their luck. The gold mines appeared to be rich, and soon the area around Kalgoorlie was known as Australia's Golden Mile. As the city is in the middle of the desert, it wasn't always easy to get there. That is why most gold diggers came to Kalgoorlie on camels. They made the streets wide enough for the caravans of these creatures to be able to turn around without any problem. Hannon Street in the center of Kalgoorlie is still a clear example of this. The city's exterior has not changed much over the past 100 years. Attractive 19th century wooden buildings still stand tall. The old saloons and hotels where the gold diggers used to spend their profits reveal the city's one-time wealth. Even the front of the town hall is lavishly decorated. Incidentally, the building is painted every 5 years. Nowadays, Kalgoorlie draws many tourists, as there's a big gold diggers museum near the town. In here, visitors can see how gold was mined. The open-air museum is in fact the old mine of Paddy Hannon himself. This tower acted as an elevator to take the mine workers down to the shafts. On the premises, visitors can try their own luck by looking for gold themselves. The red-colored ore needs to be sifted to see if some kind of gold is left. The life of the mine workers was tough. They worked in shifts, searching for gold, and between shifts, the workers slept on the premises. They got off 1 day a week. The ore from the shafts was brought up in little carts by the mine workers. Once they sifted it, any possible gold could be exchanged at the bank immediately. They're still digging for gold at a small scale in Hannon's mine, although now it's especially for tourists. It gives visitors an idea of how gold diggers used to live at the beginning of the century. Gold digging is not something just from the past. They're still searching for the precious metal on a large scale here. The mines around Kalgoorlie yearly take out about 20 tons of pure gold, an industry worth millions. The mine workers, with their pickaxes and flashlights, have made room for diggers and trucks. Nowadays, they're not only looking for gold in narrow shafts anymore, instead in big fields which are laid open. Despite protests of environmentalists, digging continues 7 days a week. In the open-air museum, there are daily demonstrations of the casting of gold. The gold grains are melted in an oven at a temperature far exceeding 1,000 degrees. After that, they're cast into a mold. And this is how the well-known bars of gold are created.
Here we go, folks. to this bar. Once it's been poured in the gold ring, be drilled at the top and drilled at the bottom. Those fines and then sent away to Perth, to the Perth Mint, or those impurities that I was talking about would be extracted from the bar, and you'd have 99.99% pure gold.
Close to the mines, there's a camel stock farm. The camels used to be utilized to bring the gold that had been found to the city Perth. The animals had to go right through the desert over a distance of hundreds of kilometers. The Indian Pacific slowly begins the last leg of our journey. We travel west and head for Perth. Exactly 653 kilometers separate Kalgoorlie from the city at the Indian Ocean. The view may seem a bit monotonous, but it is in fact the vastness of this area which makes it so interesting. In any case, passengers who become tired of it do not have to be bored. Around noon, we're halfway to Perth. For the first-class passengers, it's time for lunch. In the late afternoon, the Indian Pacific arrives at Perth. From Sydney on the east coast, the train has traveled more than 4,000 kilometers. In total, we traveled 3 days and 2 nights. Tonight, the train will be cleaned and supplies will be replenished, so tomorrow afternoon it can begin its journey back. Perth has the most hours of sun in all of Australia. Combined with a beautiful sea and spacious beaches, it makes the city a very popular seaside place. The sea is really the surfers' domain. They never stop trying to catch a ride on Indian Ocean's huge waves. However, this is much more than just a seaside place. Perth is Australia's gate of entrance to Asia. Banks and investment companies have situated their huge offices next to appealing colonial buildings. They render the city a remarkable appearance. Perth has many big parks, and there's no doubt the most attractive one is Kings Park, with more than 400 acres of greenery. In the middle of this park grow the most wonderful flowers and plants. The colorful surroundings make it into a popular place for the residents to get a break from the busy city life. Kings Park is also the Black Swans territory. This graceful bird is a symbol of the state of Western Australia. Kings Park is situated on a hill and offers a spectacular view of the city and over the Swan River. This river, which flows into the Indian Ocean, is very suitable for water sports. Water sport is one of the most popular forms of recreation for Australians. Thousands of people will come and watch a sailing contest or a speedboat race. The residents of Perth also use the boat as a regular means of transportation. Over Swan River, for instance, a day trip can be made to the Port Fremantle. Fremantle is the harbor where Dutch and British colonists first arrived. Numerous beautiful buildings from the 17th and 18th century can still be found here. The city has always been a place where sailors from all over the world could recuperate from their voyage over the ocean. Voyagers still come here to buy supplies to continue their journey. This is no surprise, as the indoor market in the city center has a lot to offer. Perth's skyline was the first piece of Australia that came into sight for thousands of sailors. For us, this sight means we've come to the end of this episode of Railway. We traveled from east to west through a fabulous country, Australia. The destination of our next episode of Railway is Switzerland. We'll not only travel by train, but we'll also get on the Wilhelm Tell Boat Express. After we've seen the beautiful mountain lakes, we'll continue our journey over Europe's highest mountaintops. Be sure not to miss this exciting episode.